Gotta love online. So I was previously a designer and a creative director. And what is really, I think, important for what I'm trying to provide is I want to give educators a lot of the skills that I guess I took for granted that I was either mentored in or I had specifically developed in some of my early professional pursuits that I think are just super relevant. And I want to be able to share those insights in a way where the technology is always helping us improve and really doing things for us. And that's actually one of the reasons that I've been pretty excited about the Microsoft tools, because I'm an Apple Power user. I use Google. I'm in those environments. I haven't owned a PC since 2005, but I have been incredibly impressed over the past 2 years with the way in which Microsoft is trying to use advancements in machine learning, AI, to actually help us become better at creating content and now presenting. And I'm really excited to talk about and share those. So just for archive purposes, I'm just going to run back to the first screen just so everybody knows what session this is, because I forgot to press record. So discovering the power of your personal presentation coach with PowerPoint. So if you can scan this QR code. This QR code is going to give you some resources to this session, the other sessions that I do. It's also going to connect you to my newsletter, where I spend quite a bit of time trying to curate resources, but I also spotlight educators. That's something that over the past couple months I've been really excited about, is just finding educators that are doing amazing things and giving them the platform to just share with my community, with my audience, the great work that they're doing. So I'll circle back to this QR code later, but let's get into the process of creating exciting and great presentations. So what goes into great presentations? There's so many different ways to engage and captivate an audience, share with them good insights, share with them ideas that will leave them more curious than they started. And what's important is these fundamentals here. So there are many others, but I think that these 5 right here are really important to look at. I'm going to go through and kind of break them down so that I can give you context for, okay, if I'm going to help students become stronger presenters, I'm going to help students become more engaging and better at captivating their audience. Of course, at an age appropriate level. We're not expecting a 3rd grader per se to be delivering a TED Talk in their first or second presentation. But there are some fundamentals that if we understand that process, then when we actually open up the presenter coach, we know how we're actually able to improve in those areas that they're measuring and they're assessing, because we are more confident, we're comfortable, we're more enthusiastic, and it really starts with the hook. Now, the hook is a way that you just spark interest, you spark curiosity. So you start with a question, you start with something that gets the audience thinking. What was your best presentation in college? Or when was the first time that you actually were required to learn presentation skills? I didn't learn presentation skills until I took a speech and presentation and sort of a general communication course my 3rd year in college. And I'm like, why wasn't that like a graduation requirement in high school? So when was that first time? Or, whatever it is that you're trying to talk about, you want to be able to create some sort of hook, something that supports the curiosity in your audience. And one of the things that you really need to do is you really need to know your audience. So that's really hard for me in this virtual transition. And I just want to be transparent, because I think that this whole conversation today is going to be about, the evolution of conversation, of presentation, and the virtual component of it is major. For the past 3-4 years, I've spent at least once, twice, sometimes 3 times a month traveling around the country and connecting with educators in person. And when I'm going to these conferences, when I'm going to these school districts, I spend quite a bit of time with that point person, really understanding who my audience is going to be, so that I can design a talk that might tell my own story. It might share insights in my teaching practice, in my classroom, but it's going to be tied into their reality. And so That's really hard to do in these virtual capacities, but you want to be able to start with a hook, something that gets them curious, something that gets them wondering. The next is enthusiasm. And you have to actually double down with your enthusiasm when you're presenting in a virtual environment. And I'm fortunate that I'm right now in my studio. It's in my detached garage. So I could technically be screaming right now, and it might not even translate as screaming to you because you can lower my volume. So it's going to come across as being animated, being excited about the content, and varying the pitch levels when we're talking about certain components during the talk. And that's actually one of the things that's analyzed with the presentation coach. And when I went through one of my keynote talks that I'm going to break down and show you like the process of what I do. So with that, I was getting a little bit of flack from the presentation coach for not having a more dynamic pitch to my voice, because I'll just be honest, it's really hard to sit here right now alone in my studio, looking at a camera, looking at my presentation slides, and then looking at a bunch of circles with people's initials, because no one wants to be on camera right now. You don't know if you're going to be spotlighted as like a giant full screen during this recorded presentation, but it's definitely an energy suck. So you have to be super extra animated and excited, and that is how you are going to be more effective and more engaging. The next is the comfort in your content. And that varies because when you talk about building presentation skills, so what's the experience for students? They're usually presenting information that they're not comfortable with, that they are not an expert in, that they're not super familiar with. You're giving them some sort of topic that ties into the learning in the classroom, and they're required to memorize and internalize that content and then present it to an audience. And so what they end up doing is either reading index cards or reading their slides because they're not familiar with the content. So I would say, if there would be one call to action that you would take from this talk, it's really setting up opportunities in the fall for students to be able to present on things that they know a lot about and that they're comfortable about, things they're passionate about, their hobbies, their interests, and really focus on building those presentation skills. So when it is time to present on information that they might not be very comfortable with or experts in, that they're going to be better at presenting because they have already established their presentation workflow when they aren't comfortable, when they are comfortable with the content that they're sharing. And if you have any questions during this talk, please use the chat. I'm going to be checking the chat. I have the chat on my second monitor here, and I'm going to just be checking that occasionally. And I think that one of the things that I really need to figure out how to do, and there's actually this really cool platform called Mural. It's like a visual mind mapping brainstorm platform. I'm going to start integrating that into my presentations because I think that one of the things that's missing is it's a two-way conversation. And that's that last point. So of course, it goes without saying, you want to use the power of media, and pictures and video are really great. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. And you know what's also worth 1,000 words? Icons. And I think that icons can create that trigger where if I just had bullet points, what makes a great presentation? Hook, enthusiasm, comfort, media, and connection. And then I spoke about that. Or each one of these different components of a great presentation has in it a couple sentences. And I'm just reading that. Those are three very different ways of presenting. And there is research that I refer to on a regular basis, multimedia learning theory by Dr. Richard Mayer. And just write that down if you're taking notes, because multimedia learning theory says that if you are presenting information and you are using visuals that are text-based, it actually cancels out because the memory component in your brain cancels out if it is trying to do two processes that are similar at the same time. And so what ends up happening is that the speech and the words on the screen, those tie into the same. Your visual and your verbal use two different components that complement each other. And so if you can use stronger visuals, visual markers, and I love icons. These icons are all found in the icon library in PowerPoint, and I'll reference that when I get out of the presentation and show you kind of the inner workings. And then, as I said before, connection. Connection is super important. Connection is what creates a talk that isn't just about me talking to you, but it's us learning together. And even though I'm the one up here sharing the information, if I can share it in a way that's customized and relevant to you, that's going to make it more meaningful and more valuable. One of the questions in the chat was, what was the name of that? And the name of it is, it's multimedia learning theory. You could just search that if you want to remember also Dr. Richard Mayer. He's that professor that's worked for the past, I don't know, 2-3 decades on this research. And it's just something that's pretty awesome, pretty exciting. And so just to remember, all 5 of these, they complement the presentation. One of the things that I find super fascinating about really like anything that we do in the practice of teaching and in supporting students is like we come up with these really great strategies like, strong presentation skills or project-based learning or design thinking. It's like, well, what if one piece is missing? Like, so what if I'm enthusiastic and comfortable? I have great media, but I lack a hook. Is it a great presentation? So these are all ways that make a great presentation. They are not necessarily going to ruin the presentation if you don't have them. But I think that if you have them and if you're really striving to have them, it's really a great recipe. So one of the activities I just wanted to share because I finally perfected this. And then also I just want to give a shout out anybody that's in this session right now that is actually helping provide value in the chat by either typing out what I'm saying if someone has a question like before I can get to it, or you're actually sharing links. You are super awesome, and I just want to thank you because that makes this space more of like a learning community and less of a lecture. But I wanted to share this activity, how to create an elevator pitch, because I think that it's a really small and awesome activity that can help build these presentation skills. And one of the things that I was excited about this is, a lot of the times we come up with great ideas, but it's not until we see it that we're absolutely blown away, that we actually see our students performing this process and actualizing it. They're like, okay, good, this actually works. So I can tell you with 100% certainty that this works. And I'm thrilled that it works because I was a little nervous at first, because this is a really difficult process. I'm going to say that I don't even know if my own elevator pitch for the work of the Tech Rabbi is incredible. I'm constantly refining it and trying to get better at it. But I had students work on startup projects in my entrepreneurship course, and they had to do a ton of research. Entrepreneurship process. I've taken a lot of professional frameworks and strategies, design thinking, lean startup, agile strategy, like all of these different pieces that are very confusing for young people. And I ended up putting together this process where they do research, they identify opportunities, identify problems, they use empathy, they go through and they get to the point where they have to present it. Because look, you can have an amazing product. You could have an amazing invention, an amazing app. And if you don't have the way to communicate and to captivate that audience and to really pique their curiosity, where they're like, I want to have this, it's going to be really difficult for them to sell what it is that they're trying to do. And just if there's someone that's not muted, I hear some sort of feedback. It might be my own feedback, but if you could just check if you're muted or if you're not, that would be awesome. So they pitched to 3 startup professionals. One runs an accelerator where she has raised $50 million for underrepresented founders. 2 of the other judges have had their companies sold to Microsoft and Salesforce, which are pretty large companies. And these are serious business people. These are serious judges. And my students had to present to them. They had to pitch. They had to start with that hook. And I said to them, you want to be careful, because if all of you start your hook with, do you know when, it might not be as strong. So you have to come up with a creative way to captivate that audience and to pique their curiosity. And they went through this process. And at the very end, the Accelerator CEO, Mandela S.H. Dixon, says to my students, she says, I'm incredibly impressed with the progress that you've made. at such a young age. And when you're ready to take this project further, when you're ready to raise capital, I hope you come to us first before you go to Shark Tank. And I was like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And it really boils down to the way in which they presented their information. Not only did they do their research, not only were they enthusiastic and comfortable with their content, they made connections. And one of the things that they did that I think I alluded to, because all three of the groups did it, but I didn't realize until they did it how incredible it was. They anticipated questions that might be asked critically against their startup so that they would be prepared at the Q&A point to just knock it out of the park when responding to the questions. And I noticed as they were practicing with me and then in the real live pitch, they were spot on with a number of the questions. And I said to them at the end with the debrief, you know, it's really important to build that presentation capacity. But when you're ready to anticipate, then you're in this live Q&A mode with professional adults, and you're ready to respond to them. That's a next level of verbal communication, of just communication at large and of presenting. So I just thought that was a cool story to share. Now, one of the things that happens, and I don't know if it's happening right now because I don't see your faces, your smiling faces, but what can happen with presentations is that you could turn into this. And you can't really blame people. If you're not engaging, if you're not captivating the audience, and your justification is that this is important conversations, this is important information, they're gonna have to know this. Know this for what? For the test? Now, I think that the landscape of education is shifting. And I think as we spend probably 6 to 8 months, maybe even the entire school year, in some sort of hybrid, digital, in-person environment, we have to engage and captivate, because I think that the machine of tests, high-stake tests, I think that is being disrupted. I don't think it'll be over, but it's basically impossible to create a test that you're not able to cheat on. Like, it's just not possible. What, you're going to make 55 different versions of the test to ensure that there's no possible way that students are going to cheat? So if we're not going to educate our students based on this test, how are we creating environments where they can be presenting information, where we can be presenting information, where we can be captivating our audience, both ourselves and our students? Whatever video platform you're using, I think by the fall, every one of the platforms is going to have breakout rooms. So you can thank Zoom for that. But those breakout rooms where introverts that aren't comfortable presenting to large groups can build their strength, build their confidence by presenting in small groups. But I think it's important to give our students that skill and that process. And what's the framework? What's the framework to create that engaging talk? I wanted to share this because I think that this is really something that was powerful for me. So if you are familiar with my work, so you know that in 2018 I was blessed to be one of the keynote speakers at the ISTE conference. And as I was building my keynote talk, a talk that, even though I'd given keynotes before, I'd never given a talk like this. A talk to 10,000 people and keeping them excited and sharing my passion and sharing my story. Like, I was pretty overwhelmed. But someone introduced me to this really amazing framework. And there's a bunch of different articles that talk about this that you can find. If you just persuasive story pattern, Harvard Business Review has an article that I refer to on a regular basis. But where I saw this for the first time, I'm going to paste the link right now in. I'm going to paste the link inside the chat real quick, because Nancy Duarte, she has a TED Talk, and this TED Talk absolutely blew my mind. And one of the things about it is
flashpoint for movement.
All right, cool. I had to go. It made sound for a moment. Okay, I just want you, not right now because I'm trying to keep you engaged over here, but you want to watch this. She does something incredible with this story pattern. She analyzes Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech and Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone. And she shows that whatever the type of theme, whatever the importance of the talk, of course, she wasn't comparing, the value or the quality of a Martin Luther King speech with Steve Jobs introducing a piece of technology. What she was showing was that regardless of the type of story that's being shared, there is a flow that gets the audience to be curious and to wonder. And it starts with sharing what is. What is the reality? Presentation skills are difficult to acquire. It's hard to share information in a way that's interesting and engaging. But what's possible is that if you understand the workflow, if you understand the pattern, then you can build your skills and you can actually present in ways that you didn't realize was possible. And you can go through this process through your slide deck, actually creating your slide deck so that when you tell the story and then you finish with a call to action that gives them a new type of clarity. So I just thought this was something cool to share. Now, this is the presentation coach rehearsal report. I spent 34 minutes presenting on my keynote that I share at districts, at different conferences, my Educated by Design keynote, how to build creative capacity. And it was interesting, as I was sharing, I realized that even with all of my confidence and comfort in presenting, it's something that I do on a regular basis. I am a pretty decent speaker. I hope I am. I do it very often. But even with me, I noticed that there were moments where, the ums, I say that a lot. And that's a filler. And it goes through and it actually analyzes live. It shows you as you're going, it's giving you feedback so that you can be aware of it and you can check yourself in the midst of the talk. It lets you know your pace. It lets you know your pitch. How are you varying the conversation and the tone and the way that you are communicating your information so that you're not just talking like this and being super monotone and not engaging, because that just doesn't work. And then it starts to put people to sleep. Even sensitive phrases. There was a moment where I referred to Mandela S.H. Dixon as a businesswoman. I said, I'm not sure if that would offend her, but why not just rework the way that we communicate information? The one that really threw me off was actually referring to freshmen as first year students. I was like, oh, that's an interesting one to ponder. But it gives you this really awesome review, this report. And it also focuses on speech refinement, ways that you maybe were a little bit more redundant, or you could have just been very, much more concise with the information that you're sharing. And then originality. So that one I knew I got the green check because almost no slides that I share have bullet points on them. And so as I run through that process, as I run through the slide deck, 75 slides in my keynote, I am communicating in a way that was really clear that there was still work to do, even with my own, professional capacity. And I just thought that this was just something that was really, really great. So before I get into the rehearsal coach, I wanted to actually break down the process of these different categories and really to get you to understand, what it is that is happening here so that you can, of course, use it yourself, but can you use it or can you teach your students how to use this and how to actually understand what is going on here and how do I fix that? And so these are the categories, and I just wanted to run through and speak a little bit about each one of these. So the first is the summary, right? And it seems quite straightforward, but I think that the students need to understand that when you are presenting information, being able to know your progression and how much time you're spending on the content is really important. And it seems just something like, oh, okay, good, I spent 35 minutes. Well, how long were you supposed to spend on it? So with our students, they're probably not going to be speaking for 30 minutes. And if they were, we'd never get through any of our presentations. But if you're doing like a 5-minute presentation, when I had my students pitch to the during the startup competition, so I said, look, you have 5 minutes to pitch, and then you will have 5 minutes of Q&A where the judges will ask you questions. So one student was like freaking out, 5 minutes? Like, I recorded myself and I practiced and I practiced and I can only do it in 7 minutes. I said, I know you can do it in 5 minutes. You have to be a little bit more focused on these different areas and really look at how you are presenting the information. So your pace, can you pick up the pace? Can you talk a little quickly without thinking that you're talking like this and it sounds like you're just, sped up and everybody's talking super quickly and no one can even keep track of you. You know what? You can't even keep your own breath and you're actually holding your breath right now and then you're taking a breath and it's just really awkward. Like no one's asking you to present like that. But is there a way to cut out some of the information, especially when there's a Q&A at the end, that you could, and it's a Q&A that people are actually going to participate. My favorite Q&As is where I say, hey, in the end, I'm going to do a Q&A, and then there are no Q&As, and it's just awkward, and then, the session ends 15 minutes early because I was hoping for 15 minutes of dynamic conversation. So please use the chat. It creates a more exciting conversation for me as I can really guide this and customize it for you. So that is, keeping that summary and then just being aware of the pace. And when you have that analysis in the presentation coach in PowerPoint, so it's telling you your pace and you can decide, maybe I could speak quicker, or maybe there are points in the conversation where I need to speak quicker because you can see the pace and you can see the flow. And are you speaking slower and quickly? And the variation is okay, right? Variation is okay. You're gonna exhaust yourself if you're gonna keep a super fast pace, even if you can keep it in a way that isn't sounding really awkward, that you're like running with your mouth and you're just racing through. So the pitch is hard. The pitch is probably one of those lifelong experiences for students. As they become adults, we all struggle with it. And it really has to do with just being hyper aware of your pitch, hyper aware of how you are communicating information. So when you think about it, if you're going to have a sentence, maybe there's a word that you're going to emphasize. And you just saw right there that as I was talking, I emphasized the word. It doesn't have to be like super complicated, but there's just ways to go about creating a more varied conversation as you're emphasizing things. Or if there's points where you're really excited, share that excitement a little bit more than hopefully your standard excitement when you're presenting. So there was a question. So just confirmation. Awesome. Yeah. So I love those comments in the chat as well. Comments, questions, curiosity. Hey, you're going too fast. Hey, I missed that part. Can you repeat it? I'm happy to do all of that. So then we get to filler words. Filler words. You would think gasoline, that's a pretty critical piece, but you know what? You can overflow your gas tank, and that's what happens with filler words. So the more confident, the more comfortable you are with your content, the better you will be at removing some of those filler words. But you're still going to have those filler words creep up until you practice them out of you. You literally have to practice them out of you. And that means that you become okay with a very interesting strategy when you're presenting, and you should mentor your students in this as well. So how long was that right there? For me, it felt like it was probably like 8 seconds, but it was really like maybe 2 seconds. And it's okay to pause for a second and breathe. We have this fear that the people in our audience are going to think we don't know what we're talking about, or we're not a good presenter if we pause for a moment and just collect our thoughts. Even that moment right there was not so bad. I mean, was it bad? Let me know in the chat. Like, how did that feel for that moment right there? Did it feel like really long? Did you feel uncomfortable? Because if you didn't, so please let me know in the chat. I am really curious. It's not that long, and it gives you a moment to just breathe and to just compose yourself and to think, okay, what's the next thing that I'm going to talk about? And that's going to remove those ums and uhs and you knows, and it can make it a better conversation. That's what it does. Now, originality, originality. You know, I went to art school. I was going to be a famous artist before I became an educator. And one of the things that I've always been super fascinated with is like originality. What does that mean? So all that it means when you're presenting is not that you created a brand new talk that's never been heard before. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. It's that you created a story, a narrative, and a conversation, and that you weren't simply repeating what everybody could read on the screen. That's what that means, at least in the context of the presentation coach. Now, the sensitive phrases piece, I think is super important because look, we're all guilty of it. There are phrases that, I mean, obviously we're not talking about offensive phrases. We're talking about sensitive phrases. And so when you're sharing information, by the way, and so, that's filler. When you're sharing information, there are ways that you might reference your audience. You guys, seems harmless, could be uncomfortable for some people. I don't feel like I'm connected to that word that is referencing the group. And so is he talking to me? And you can actually disconnect from your audience. Then, of course, the ones that I had shared in my own session or in my own report, there's plenty of sensitive phrases, and it's going to analyze them for you. And then you can decide. And of course, if you're practicing a presentation that's revolved around something that involves sensitive phrases, then the presentation software isn't going to work in your benefit for that, right? But for 98% of other types of presentations, I think that that's a really important piece. Then refined speech. We're all guilty of it, myself included. It's not even to feel guilty about. It's just a reality is that when you're presenting information, unless you've written down a script and you've memorized it, you've memorized your lines, you are going to share things sometimes that are going to be a little bit elongated. They're going to be a little bit drawn out, and you could have said it in a more concise way. And I think doing the presentation coach and watching and listening to yourself and then reviewing at the end, you'll realize, okay, those were those moments where I needed to be a little bit more focused. And a lot of this process and presentation coach is going to be showcased in the moment. It's not just going to be something where you get a report at the end and you're like, well, when did that happen? I don't even know. So I'm going to get out of the presentation right now. And I want to show you the rehearsal, right? Okay. So you get into Rehearsal Coach. And real quick, let me just, if everybody could just double check your mute. Oh, I could just mute people. Cool. I got this weird static on my end, but as long as it's not on your end, that's great. Okay, so you have your presentation coach here, and you start the presentation, you start rehearsing, and you have to show the real-time feedback, because that, like, I will just tell you that if I look at this report at the end, and I'm like trying to remember at what point in the past 30 minutes to an hour, or, I mean, if you have a 5-minute talk that you're practicing, you know, it won't be a problem there. But if you are presenting something that is a little bit longer, it's going to be very difficult to make sure that you can remember where you actually had the issue that needs to be refined or resolved if you don't have your real-time feedback. And so you just start talking, and you could say, welcome to this presentation. We're going to discover the power of your personal presentation coach with PowerPoint. And I'm excited because I want you to think about a time where you were an attendee during a talk, or maybe when you were a presenter at a talk. How did it feel, whether you were the presenter or the attendee, when the talk was not engaging? How many of us can sit on a Zoom call during the course of pandemic teaching and literally be the entire time you're having this business, this meeting, you're just sitting here on your phone and you're just working through here. You've totally toned out. The content isn't relevant. It isn't engaging. It isn't exciting. There's a monotone style of speaking, and you're just not engaged. Now, we might say that faculty meeting is probably the worst example because there's no such thing as an exciting and engaging faculty meeting. But there, I said it. So I wanted to just introduce myself for those that are not familiar. Who am I? My name is Michael Cohen. I'm the tech rabbi. And in addition to being a designer and an educator, I consider myself at least to be an aspiring creativity instigator. I'm a storyteller. I'm a content creator. And what I love to do is I love to be able to show educators ways that they can build their creative communication capacity, their courage in presenting information and creating content, and then giving over those skills and abilities and that knowledge to their students as well. I'll just skip through that part. And so I want to share what makes a great presentation. It starts with a hook. It starts with piquing the curiosity of the information and that enthusiasm that shares the content in a way that's exciting. And it really has to do with how confident and comfortable you are with the information that you're sharing and how you're using media to engage your audience and to pique their curiosity. And most importantly, it's going to be about connection. How are you connecting with the people that you are trying to inspire, trying to introduce information to? What are you doing to make sure that the information that you are sharing is relevant to them and not just relevant because you're an expert? And so when you're done, because obviously I'm not going to like redo the entire presentation that you just had to sit through, but that's 2 minutes and 22 seconds. Now, what you see here is a couple different things. Okay, first of all, I got green check marks, which is yay for me, right? That's what you want. You want to have those check marks. And there was even actually a moment, I think that the presentation coach was a little bit forgiving because I believe there was a point where I did have one of those fillers. And there were a couple points where I actually stumbled over my words, but that has just to do with practice. Get more comfortable with your content. So I rehearsed for 2 minutes and 22 seconds. I had a pretty even 137 words per minute, and the pace is just right. And I think that the pace is probably between the middle hundreds to, I think, probably about 155, 160. After that, I think it's just going to get a little bit too fast. So I would say 140 is probably that magic number. The next is the pitch. You want to have a varied pitch. If your pitch is a flat line, like God forbid on a heart monitor in a hospital, nobody's going to be excited about that. So you want to have that variation. You want to have that flow where it's ups and downs. And as I said before, when you're alone in a remote learning environment, you can lower my volume if I'm too loud. The truth is, I feel like I have to scream because when I'm on stage and I'm connecting with the audience, it's a totally different experience. Or when I'm in a classroom and I get to connect with people, non-social distancing, like not 6 feet, but maybe like, 16 inches from them as I'm looking at their device and seeing the work that they're doing. Like those are the moments that the energy really creates the environment for me. And so when I'm here and I'm not connected with you, in a face-to-face environment. So I'm connected with you through the chat. I'm connected with you through the Teams environment. So I have to just be a little bit more extra. Then the originality, of course, as I said before, you just want to be able to create slides where you know what you're going to say, and those images or those icons trigger your memory so that you can share the story. And then do you know what that does? That triggers the memory of the people that are listening to you, and then they're going to remember what you said. And so when you can remember those icons, those 5 different pieces, how about this? I'm going to do this right now. We're going to do a little test right now, okay? I just hid the slide. So who wants to share in the chat? What are the 5 components or 5 components, not the only ones, but 5 components that can create a really great presentation? I want to see if you can just put that into the chat and see if you can remember those. I'm hoping that the icons created that memorability for you, and if not, the fact that I already shared it like 3 times, including 35 seconds ago. Awesome! Yay! Cool. Yay, people in the chat. I feel like we're connecting. So that originality is super important. sensitive phrases, I was pretty good there, but it's just important to be aware of it. I think that that's going to be a huge piece of getting people to just refine their speech, refine how they communicate information. And so that's the rundown. That's the rundown with that. So kind of like, what would next steps be? What would the activity be? So I would propose that if you were trying to create some sort of experience for your students in the fall, that they would be able to present like I would say like 3 to 5 minute presentation around something that they're passionate about. I try to steer clear of like, how was your summer? We don't know how everyone's summers were. And that could be a crushing experience for students to have to share that or not share it, and maybe even lie because they're embarrassed about what their summer looked like. So I try to steer clear of things that can sort of expose students and make them vulnerable. But everyone has a passion. And if your passion is video games or sports or drawing, or maybe it's skydiving, right? We don't know what our students' passions are per se, especially if it's a new group of students that we haven't taught before. But being able to have them create content and then refining their skills using the presentation coach, and then maybe even in small groups so that you could actually have them present and then have them practice for a week using presentation coach. If it's a 3 to 5 minute presentation and they go through, 4 or 5 times, it's not a crazy amount of time to practice. And then have them present a second time. That could be an awesome experience for students. And I could see this being relevant, as early as, 3rd or 4th grade. One of my sons he just finished 4th grade. And his teacher had him present a number of different times during the course of the school year in small groups and then to the group at large. And one of the things that happened is the teacher gave him choice. He chose to present about rocket ships, about space travel, but he didn't have the presentation skills. And this was, I'm pretty sure, the first time he had ever presented information in his life. And it was very difficult for him. And I actually worked through the process of making an amazing presentation with him. And then it ended up being amazing for him. He actually loved it because he knew what needed to happen along the way to make sure that he could be successful. And then using the presentation coach was something that was really great for him to actually see, how he's speaking, how quickly, how slowly he's speaking. Is there pauses? Look at the average pace over the time. Does it flow? And what do those flows mean? Of course, those flows mean that there is pausing. There is a slowdown. And what does that slowdown mean? You can actually go through and you can look at and you can see, well, I think that the slide, what I wish, if I would give feedback to Microsoft, which maybe I will now that I think about it, is like in this pace over time, could it actually mark the slide so that it actually shows that? And I didn't mean to click that just yet. So that it actually shows that. And then I just wanted to show you all of these learn mores go to another slide, or not another slide, but a website, all the same website, and it just like hyperlinks it to the certain points. But it basically gives you suggestions. I thought this was really cool. It breaks down and explains the different components of the report, and then it gives you advice and things to be aware of, and then recommendations. This is really great. I mean, this is a gold mine. I cannot tell you how important this is. I mean, I don't want to put any of the professional speaking coaches out of business, but this is a professional coach. This is giving you really powerful insights that can level up your ability to present information. And then, of course, you can work on the storytelling mechanism and the way in which you go through that process of captivating your audience. There's 2 components of what's making a really great presentation. But I'm just absolutely in love with this. I'm telling you right now, look, if I'm presenting in Keynote, that's fine. I'm exporting it into PowerPoint so that I can present and practice and refine what I'm sharing in this presentation coach. And it's also worth noting with PowerPoint that you can actually, not on the web, but on the desktop, instead of presenting your whole screen, you can present just a window, and then you can have your additional screens if you have like 2 monitors open. But that's just, that's just one piece that I think is really important. I wanted to spend the last few minutes just kind of running through some of the features in PowerPoint that can really enhance your ability to be a great presenter and to support that presentation process with your students. Let me just check in the chat. Yeah, oh, that's cool. So Christina Valentina said that the students should be able to present on this. I think that's really cool. I mean, look, one of the things that I am in love with, and I share this in a lot of different talks that I give, is that students facilitating learning is a incredible way to demonstrate mastery and a really high level of knowledge and understanding. When students are also facilitating and presenting learning, they're a little bit more accountable to the content because other people are going to see it. That's just a natural process. Now, they might not be in the beginning great presenters, and I've actually over the years I've worked with educators that are my colleagues at different schools that I've worked at, where I've collaborated with them to remove the presentation mechanism from the classroom because it wasn't working. And the truth is, if the presentation coach existed in 2013, 14, when we were launching our one-to-one iPad program, and we realized that it would be better for students to create interactive books than presentations in front of the classroom on the smartboard that put people to sleep. So I probably would have focused more on presentations if presentation coach existed, but I just think that it's pretty awesome. Another thing that I need to send to Microsoft, because I think this would be awesome, is I'd like to be able to export this. I'd like to be able to share this and save it. And I had to screenshot it because you can't save it, and that just made me sad. But yeah, just wanted to share that. 4th grade daughter also did a biography project on an astronaut. And that included PowerPoint presentation. It was hard to not get involved. I hear you. With our own children, it's like hard to not get involved. It's like the science fair, right? It's like, wow, those are amazing science projects. How long did it take your parents to do those? But yeah, I think the presentation skills, that it's there. It's for our own children. It's for our students. So I just wanted to show you. I'm in here. I just want to walk through a couple of these pieces. So, like, for example, right here, when I'm thinking of a title for or thinking of text on the screen for a presentation, I'm obsessed with icons, by the way, because I think that icons, they showcase information in a different way than a photo does. So when I'm thinking of like discovering the power, so I'm looking for things that represent power, represent discovery. And if you look at this really cool setting here, right? Or not setting, but tool set. So you have the ability to import a bunch of different things. And one of them is icons. I love the icons. Now, Keynote has icons, PowerPoint has icons, Google Slides does not yet have icons, but I just love icons. I love icons because I think it's a really, really cool way to give a different perspective. And if I was talking about perspective, check out these right here. If I'm going to talk about a different perspective, maybe I'm going to use some 3D glasses because I just feel like that's a cool way to showcase perspective. I don't know. It was there. I had to share. So you want to go through that process of adding icons. They also have the cutout people, like over here. Hold on, let me go over here. Right, these cutout people. I love these cutout people. So if you go into insert icons, there's these cutout people, and there's, you can search them if you develop, a favorite cutout person, you can actually find like all of the ways that these different individuals are cut out. But there's a really, really cool way to see how you could use these and how you could share information, how you could present. They have stock images as well. And then with pictures, you can actually pull pictures from your OneDrive. You can pull them also from the Bing Greater Picture Search. But the stock images are all royalty free. I'm not exactly sure how Bing sets this up as far as the copyright permission. But as you see, like when you run through, I love icons. I feel like icons just share and just showcase. And then one of the things that I'm guilty of is, I love animation, but sometimes if the animation, isn't automatic, you can just kind of forget that. As I was in this slide, I was actually meant to, as I said, the hook, and then I said enthusiasm, and then I said comfort. As I went through and shared, they expanded and got bigger to show the emphasis as I was presenting on that specific component. Now, on the Microsoft PowerPoint Online, it doesn't have the full feature set. It's not as sophisticated as the desktop. So there's actually a way to make the icon both get bigger and then smaller. So only the one that I'm talking about is getting bigger and smaller. And I thought about, okay, go fix it on the desktop and then get it uploaded back in the on the online version, because the online Microsoft, the PowerPoint Online is the only one that has the Rehearse with Coach. It doesn't have it on the desktop. And I'm not sure if there's anybody in here that is a Microsoft Innovative Educator. Sometimes Kathy is inside. So if there is no one, I believe that there is a version of Microsoft Office Online that is free, right? Just like Google Slides is free. So I believe, or like the Google Apps is free. I believe that you can access that, but I'm not 100%. So if that was a misquote, I apologize. But Mary said she is. So I don't know if if the Microsoft Office Online is free for anybody in education. But if you want to respond in the comment, that would be super cool. Veronica Garcia mentioned something important in the chat, which is it's showing your growth over time. Absolutely. That's the thing that I think is really great. So as our students are presenting, they can, until Microsoft creates an exportable report, they can just screenshot it and look at over the course of the year. If you give 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 presentations over the course of the school year, which I don't think is unrealistic, especially when we're talking about the remote learning environment or the hybrid environment. We have to engage our students more as presenters of information. We can no longer be the sage on the stage. Those days are done. Now there's time for lecture. There's time for lecture when you're learning new things, maybe when you're being introduced to something for the first time. But I'll tell you that the greatest moments of joy for me in my entrepreneurship and in my STEAM courses that I teach is where a student says, Rabbi Cohen, I don't know if you'd mind, but I'd like to present this specific thing because I've been doing this for a while. I'm like, go ahead. I want to sit back. I want to learn from you. And that's happened a number of times in my classes where a student will be really good at app design and just say, hey, I'd like to share. If you guys could just mute yourself. Awesome. Thank you. So if someone is really great, like I would love for them to present instead of me. But I think that we need to bring more and more of that into the more and more into the process. So Mary shared a link. Yeah, so I think one of the cool things, so someone asked about like if you're a Chromebook classroom. So if you are, yeah, the web version works, right? I'm running PowerPoint in this web browser. And so that has nothing to do with the software or the operating system that I'm using. So being able to share that data and that growth over time. That's part of a portfolio. That's really a portfolio piece where students can share a beginning, middle, and end of the year where they presented information. Let's say they just present 3 times. And I don't mean to the whole class. They can present in small groups. It's about building those presentation skills. And the presentation coach can actually be running during the presentation when they're presenting in small groups. And I think that that's something that's really cool. So we have about 2 minutes left. And I was going to actually do like the last 5 minutes, but I was a little bit nervous because I've done this before and no one's had any questions. So 2 minutes. If you want to raise your hand, you can then unmute yourself and you can ask a question via audio, or if you want to ask a question via the chat as well. I'm happy to just engage in your conversations and in your questions.
I did have a question, Michael.
Awesome.
Thank you for this awesome presentation. You have me. I do professional development in K-12, so I'm going to use this and definitely share it with my teachers. I've been texting and screenshotting and all of that, so hopefully I can send the presentation to them. But my question, I want to find this feature because I love this feature. I didn't even know it existed until just now. Where is the presentation coach online? You said it's not on the app. Do I just go to Microsoft, Google it? How do I get it?
Yeah, great question. So I'll share my screen again and just go over here. Okay, so you have to get, you go onto office.com and you're able to log in with your Microsoft login, and you're able to get to PowerPoint. So let me just see if I can like replicate this from scratch. So I go to office.com and I'm logged in, good morning, Michael Cohen, and I have my apps to start creating. And then I have the files that I've been working with. So I do a lot on the desktop because it has a larger feature set. And then when I'm ready to present or do something that needs the online version, so then I'll upload it. So you go to the file, and you can actually upload, right? You can upload a file that you have created on the desktop version. And when you get into the file, so you go to slideshow, and in slideshow you have like present from the beginning, present from the current slide that you're on, and then you have this rehearse with coach, and that's how you bring that in.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'm so glad that you came, and thank you for the question. Anyone else have a question? Yeah, Becky Keene, she's like a master. Just want to give her a shout out. She just published a book, Sailing the Seven Seas with Microsoft Education. And she is, I can't tell you how much I've learned from her. She is an awesome, awesome educator that is doing great things with Microsoft tools. So she said office.com, as I demonstrated. Let's see if there's some other questions over here. Yeah, so I think that was the core question, which I'll just make a mental note, probably should show people how to get to where I'm telling them to go to in the beginning of the presentation. But I just want to thank everybody for being part of this. I am far from a Microsoft expert. I'm working on it. I'm doing my own professional development to really, really hone my skills with the tools. But my unique value that I'm trying to provide is I understand the process of presentation, of design, of bringing creativity into the classroom. And what I realized, especially during this pandemic that we're in and this remote learning experience that we've gone through, is that I can't limit myself, and I also can't limit how the work that I share is bringing value to other educators. So since February, I have hit the ground running, and I am looking at every possible way to build the skills around the tools, but it's because the tools complement the mindset that I'm trying to share. So I'm going to have sessions pretty much weekly, sometimes twice a week. I'll be sharing that information on my Twitter. And so I just want to pull up two more things. The first is if you want to scan this QR code again, you can not only get access to my newsletter, but it's just a place for me to share resources with you and connect with you. I just put out one email a week, and I try my best, as I said before, to spotlight educators and share things that are happening. So I'm going to be presenting through the course of the summer on PowerPoint, on OneNote, on Sway, on ways to build storytelling skills. And I'm just grateful for all of you that were part of this presentation. And I just want to thank you once again, and hope that you can connect with me on social media. You can connect with me on Twitter. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. Whatever platform you want to connect on, I'm most likely there with the tag, the Tech Rabbi. So thanks again for connecting, and I hope that you're ready to use this tool yourself, and of course give it to your students as well.